The text came at dawn, anonymous and chilling, slicing through the quiet hum of a wedding morning. Don't go to your brother's wedding. Check your husband's garage. Sarah froze, her fingers trembling over the phone screen. A prank? A mistake? Or something far worse? Hours before her brother James's vows in the heart of Riverside City, the message gnawed at her, a splinter of dread lodged in her chest. She glanced at the mirror, her reflection a stranger, poised, polished, yet unraveling. 12 years of marriage to David, a life built on trust, suddenly felt like a house of cards. One push, one step toward that garage, and it could all collapse. But could she ignore the warning, or was the truth already waiting, hidden in the shadows of a locked door just blocks away? Today was a special day. Her younger brother, James, was getting married. The whole family had been looking forward to this moment with great anticipation. James was the family's golden boy, the life of every gathering, and everyone wanted him to be happy with Rachel. As the older sister, Sarah felt a deep emotional connection to the occasion. She had seen James bloom by Rachel's side, how his eyes sparkled when he spoke about her. Sunlight poured through the apartment windows, filling the space with the hum of pre-wedding bustle. Their mother was busy in the kitchen preparing traditional homemade pies. Their father sat at the table checking off names on the guest list. Sarah was finishing up getting ready. Her husband David had already left earlier that morning, claiming he had an urgent meeting with a client. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be there in time for the ceremony," he'd said, kissing her goodbye. His tone was casual, affectionate, nothing out of the ordinary. And yet, something about it left Sarah feeling unsettled. She glanced at herself in the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was that of a confident, successful woman, loved, grounded. She worked as an accountant at a large firm and took pride in her sense of order and rationality. 12 years of marriage to David had seemed peaceful, secure. Sure, they had their small disagreements and miscommunications, but nothing unusual. Life felt steady and content, or so she had thought. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. Sarah frowned. A short, strange message popped up on the screen. "Don't go to the wedding. Check your husband's garage." Her heart skipped a beat. What did that even mean? Who would send something like that? She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a prank or a wrong number. But the feeling of dread didn't fade. It grew heavier by the second. The apartment, once so warm with energy, now seemed hushed, haunted by a silence that crept in after David's departure. She reread the message. Check your husband's garage. Why? What would be there? David had never hidden anything from her. He'd always been honest. Or at least she thought so. She tried calling him, but he didn't answer. He's probably still in that meeting, she told herself, but her chest tightened with unease. Panic was starting to rise. She attempted to distract herself, helped her mom in the kitchen for a bit, but her thoughts kept looping back. Don't go to the wedding. Check the garage. The words lodged in her mind like splinters. Sarah knew she couldn't ignore it. Something was off. But what was she supposed to do? Drive to the garage? It seemed absurd. David would be upset, would think she didn't trust him, but how could she shake this gnawing feeling if she didn't check? She looked at the clock. The ceremony was still hours away. David should have been back by now, or at least called, but there was nothing. And then she remembered the spare key. David had once mentioned making a copy of the garage key just in case. She racked her memory, trying to remember where he said he'd put it. Then it hit her. Inside the old keepsake box, the one they kept in the closet filled with old letters and souvenirs. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There it was, a small, unassuming piece of metal that might very well shatter her world. Sarah hesitated. Was this really worth it? Was she going to betray her own trust in her marriage because of some anonymous text? But the fear, the curiosity, the ache in her chest, they all screamed louder than her doubt. She decided to go quietly. Just a quick check. No one had to know. Then she could come back and pretend none of this ever happened. Sarah slipped out of the apartment, careful not to make a sound. Her parents remained unaware. She headed downstairs and stepped into the sun. The brightness stung her eyes, but she felt no warmth, only dread. The garage wasn't far, just a few blocks. She walked quickly, her mind racing, doing everything it could to block out the storm of thoughts screaming inside her. When she arrived, the rows of steel garage units loomed in a lifeless line along the edge of the lot. She found the right one, David's. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She pulled the key from her pocket, slid it into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. It was dark and smelled of oil, old rubber, and cold cement. Sarah turned on the flashlight on her phone and scanned the room. David's car, a dusty old Lincoln, sat in the far corner. Tools lined the walls, spare parts, old boxes, nothing suspicious. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was nothing, just a prank. A cruel, stupid joke. Sarah turned to leave, then froze. Something in the corner caught her eye, a large cardboard box covered by a worn-out blanket. Her feet moved before she had time to think. She pulled back the fabric. Inside were things that didn't belong. A woman's purse, high heels, a box from a luxury perfume brand. Her stomach turned. She knew these things. They belonged to Rachel, James's fiancée. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred for a moment as her mind scrambled to make sense of what she was seeing. Why would Rachel's things be here in David's garage? She reached into the box, her hands shaking. She pulled out the purse and opened it. Inside were familiar items. A wallet, a small makeup bag, a set of keys, and photos. Sarah's heart pounded as she took out the stack of photographs and held them up to the light. It was David and Rachel. In every single one, they were on a beach somewhere, clearly on vacation. They were laughing, kissing, embracing like lovers. In one picture, he was holding her hand as she leaned her head on his shoulder, beaming. In another, they sat at a small seaside cafe, sunglasses on, looking like a couple straight out of a travel ad. Sarah staggered back a step, clutching the photos like they were burning her hands. The garage around her seemed to close in. The air felt thick. Her legs nearly gave out. Everything shattered. The man she had loved, the brother she had adored, the family she had fought so hard to protect. It had all been a lie, a cruel, tangled lie. Still dazed, she reached into the bottom of the box and found a folder. She opened it, unsure if she could take any more, but unable to stop herself. Inside were pages of printed messages, handwritten notes, snippets of conversations between David and Rachel. Sarah read, her eyes flying across the lines, her heart bleeding with every word. Baby, I'm so glad we're doing this together. Thank you for always believing in me. I know it's wrong, but I can't live without you. You're my life. I'm marrying James for the future. You know this won't last. Once I'm his wife, we'll finally be together. You'll leave Sarah, and we'll be free. Sarah's hands began to tremble. She dropped the folder on the hood of the car, barely able to breathe. Rachel had never loved James. She was marrying him as a front so she and David could have the life they secretly planned. And David. He had stood in their home, kissed her that morning, smiled like everything was fine. All of it had been a performance. Her first instinct was rage, a deep, pulsing fury that started in her chest and surged through her limbs. She wanted to scream, smash the garage to pieces, call them both, and expose everything in one brutal, thunderous strike. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there in the dim, dusty light, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, and let the quiet fury settle into something colder. Resolve. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let her brother walk into a marriage built on lies. She couldn't let these two destroy him the way they had destroyed her. Sarah pulled out her phone and began taking photos of everything. The shoes, the perfume box, the purse, the photographs, the notes. She captured it all carefully, methodically. She knew she had to be smart. If David found out she'd been there, he might destroy the evidence or spin some excuse. She couldn't risk that. Once she was done, she carefully placed everything back exactly the way she found it. She wiped down anything she had touched, trying not to leave any trace. Then she turned off her flashlight and stepped out of the garage, locking the door behind her. Outside, the world felt different. Colder, thinner, unreal. Her thoughts raced as she walked back to the car. What now? Should I go to the wedding and pretend nothing's wrong, or should I tell James right away? She knew a wedding was no place for this kind of truth. Not in front of the guests, not in the middle of joy and celebration. But she also couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. Sarah climbed into her car and stared at the steering wheel for a moment, trying to steady herself. Then she made a decision. She would talk to James alone, somewhere quiet, somewhere private. She dialed his number. The line rang endlessly. Then he picked up. "Hey, what's going on?" James sounded happy, distracted. "Why aren't you at the venue yet?" "James," Sarah said, doing everything she could to keep her voice steady, "I need to talk to you. It's important." "What's wrong? Tell me." "I can't. Not over the phone. It's too personal. Can we meet? Just for a few minutes?" James paused. She could almost hear the shift in his breathing. "Now, Sarah, the wedding's in less than an hour." "I know, but it's about Rachel." Silence, then a quiet exhale. "Okay," he said at last. "Where?" "Back entrance of the venue." "Half an hour, please, James." "I'll be there," he said and hung up. Sarah leaned her head back against the seat. Her heart was still racing, her hands cold, but she had done the hardest part. She had made the choice to tell him the truth, no matter what it cost. Sarah arrived at the venue just a few minutes before the arranged time. As she pulled up, she saw James pacing near the back entrance of the restaurant, glancing at his watch, clearly agitated. His tuxedo looked sharp, his hair freshly styled, but there was tension in his posture, worry in the way he turned his head every few seconds. She parked the car and stepped out, clutching the envelope that now held the printed photos and messages. James spotted her and came over quickly, his face filled with concern. "What's going on, S? You're scaring me." Sarah didn't answer right away. She opened her bag, took out the envelope, and handed it to him. "Look for yourself," she said softly. "You deserve to know the truth." James frowned as he took it. He pulled out the photos and began to flip through them one by one. At first, he smiled, a nervous, puzzled smile, as though he thought it might be a prank or a misunderstanding. But as he kept turning pages, the color drained from his face. His brow tightened, his lips parted, but no words came out. When he reached the messages, he froze. He scanned each one with growing disbelief. Then quietly, his hands began to shake. He looked up at Sarah, eyes wide and glistening. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "This can't be real." "I wish it wasn't," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But I found it all in David's garage. I saw it with my own eyes." James looked back down at the photos, gripping them tightly. His chest rose and fell in uneven waves. The reality was sinking in, slow, brutal, undeniable. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would she do this to me?" Sarah stepped forward and gently placed a hand on his arm. "I don't know," she said. "But you can't go through with this, James. Not with her. Not after this." He pulled away slightly, pressing a palm to his face as if trying to stop his head from spinning. "The wedding's in an hour. The guests, Mom and Dad, everyone's already here. How the hell am I supposed to do this?" "You don't have to do it alone," Sarah said. "I'll help you. Whatever you need, we'll get through it together." James looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. The decision had landed. It hurt like hell, but somewhere deep in his eyes, Sarah saw something harden. Conviction, truth. "Let's go," he said. Inside the venue, the atmosphere was buzzing with excitement. Music played softly, and chatter filled the air. Guests were seated, sipping champagne and smiling in anticipation. Rachel stood near the floral archway, radiant in white, nervously adjusting her veil. She turned as James approached. "Jimmy, sweetheart, where have you?" "There won't be a wedding," he said, his voice calm, firm, unflinching. The room stilled, the murmurs stopped. Rachel blinked, stunned. "What? What are you saying? Is this some kind of joke?" "I know," James said. "I know everything about you, about David. I've seen the pictures. I've read the messages." Her face twisted first in confusion, then panic. No, that's not true. That's a lie. Who told you that?" "This is slander." "It doesn't matter who told me," he replied, his voice steady. What matters is I know the truth, and I'm not going to marry someone who's been lying to me." Rachel's voice cracked, sharp and shrill. "How dare you? How dare you ruin this day? Do you know what you're doing?" "I know exactly what I'm doing," James said. "I'm stopping this before it becomes something even worse." She turned towards Sarah, her eyes wild. "It was you, wasn't it? You've always hated me. You've always been jealous." "Don't be ridiculous, Rachel," Sarah said coolly. "I'm not jealous. I'm just protecting my brother." "Protecting?" Rachel hissed. "You mean sabotaging? You wanted to destroy our happiness." "You were never going to be happy," Sarah replied. "Not when it was all built on lies." Rachel trembled with rage. She stepped towards Sarah with her hand raised, but before she could strike, James caught her wrist. "Don't," he said firmly. "Just don't. Get out of here, Rachel. And don't ever come back." Her mouth fell open in disbelief. She yanked her hand free and looked around the room at the stunned guests, at the ruined flowers, at the dreams crumbling beneath her heels. Then, with a furious cry, she stormed down the aisle and out the door, slamming it behind her. James stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly he sank onto a nearby chair. His shoulders sagged, his hands clasped together tightly. The silence in the room was suffocating. "What happens now?" he whispered. Sarah crouched beside him. "Now you breathe," she said gently. "And then we start over." Shortly after the wedding was called off, David approached Sarah as if sensing that something was terribly wrong. His face was pale, his eyes nervous. "Sarah," he asked, his voice hesitant, uneasy, "what's going on? Why did James cancel the wedding?" Sarah met his eyes, standing tall. There was no more fear in her, only clarity. "Because he knows, David. He knows about you and Rachel." David stood still, like he had been struck. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. She could see the panic blooming behind his eyes. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered. "It doesn't matter," she said, her tone ice cold. "What matters is that it's over. He's not going to marry your mistress." David's face darkened. "You told him," he hissed. "You ruined everything." "I saved him," Sarah replied. "And I saved myself. You ruined everything the day you betrayed us." His jaw clenched. "You'll regret this. I won't forgive you for this." And then he turned and left, storming out of the venue without another word. Sarah watched him go with a heavy heart, not because she mourned what they had, but because she knew he wouldn't let it end quietly. David would retaliate. That was his nature, but she no longer feared him. She was done being the trusting, naive woman she once was. His betrayal had burned that part of her away. A few days later, David left their home. He packed his things and disappeared without a goodbye or a note. Sarah didn't try to stop him. She knew there was nothing left to fight for. Their marriage had died the moment she found that red purse in the garage. Silence settled over the apartment like a heavy curtain. She sat down on the couch, closed her eyes, and allowed herself to feel the pain, the sorrow, the disbelief, the fear. But beneath it all, there was something else, too, a sense of release, of forward motion, of freedom. The next few days passed in a haze. Sarah began gathering paperwork for the divorce, meeting with a lawyer, and trying to process the emotional wreckage. It was exhausting, but she forced herself to stay strong for James and for herself. James, too, was struggling. The betrayal had cut him deeply. But he tried to put one foot in front of the other. He and Sarah leaned on each other during those first brutal weeks, bound even more tightly now by what they had both survived. One evening, James came over for dinner. He looked tired, but more alive than he had in days. There was something different in his eyes, something hopeful. "Thank you, he said as he pulled her into a hug. "You saved me. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You'll always have me," she replied softly. "We'll get through this together." "I know," he said, pulling back with a small smile. "I've been thinking. I want to start something new. Maybe my own business. I've had this idea for a long time. I think I'm ready." Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful, James. I believe in you. I know you can do it." They sat together for hours that evening, talking about the future, remembering the past, dreaming about what could be. They had both been broken, but they had not been destroyed. In their shared pain, they had found something solid, something unshakable. The divorce process, to Sarah's surprise, went relatively smoothly. There had been no prenuptial agreement, which ended up working in her favor. Everything they'd built over the years, the apartment, the car, the accounts, was split evenly. David didn't contest it. It was as if he just wanted to wash his hands of the whole thing. Sarah didn't feel victorious. She felt relieved, like the nightmare was finally starting to end. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the garage and preparing to move out, Sarah's phone rang. A number she didn't recognize flashed across the screen. Her first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Hello, Sarah. It's Michael," said the voice on the other end. The name was faintly familiar. "Michael, I'm sorry, I don't. I worked with David," he said gently. "At the firm. You came to the office once or twice. I doubt you'd remember." Now she did. Michael had been quiet, reserved, someone who faded easily into the background. She had seen him in passing, never exchanged more than a few polite words. "Yes, I remember," she said, her tone cautious. "Is something wrong? I just thought you deserved to know," he continued. "I was the one who sent you that anonymous message before James's wedding." Sarah's breath caught. She went still. "You," she said in disbelief. "You sent it?" "Yes. But why?" There was a long pause. Then, with a touch of bitterness, Michael said, "Because Rachel tried it with me too before David. She tried to use me, manipulate me. She wanted something. Promotion, leverage, I don't know. When I found out what she was doing with David and what she planned with your brother, I couldn't let it happen. I had to say something. But I was afraid. I didn't think anyone would believe me. So, I stayed anonymous." Sarah was stunned. She had never considered that there might be someone else. Another person tangled in the lies. Another victim. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You saved me. You saved James." "I just wanted justice," Michael replied. "I watched David deceive you. I watched Rachel deceive James, and I couldn't sit back." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of it all settle into something clearer. This man, quiet, unseen, had been the one to tip the first domino, and it had changed everything. "Thank you," she said. "You did the right thing. You deserve the truth," Michael said. And then the call ended. After her conversation with Michael, Sarah sat in silence for a long time, holding her phone in her lap, letting the weight of the truth settle inside her. So she hadn't imagined it. Her instincts had been right. And she hadn't been alone. Not entirely. There had been someone out there quietly watching, quietly caring, someone who had dared to reach out when no one else would. For the first time in weeks, Sarah didn't feel so isolated in her pain. She realized that her strength hadn't come just from within. It had come from connection, from her bond with James, from the courage of a stranger, from the small brave acts of truth that shattered the web of lies around her. That night, something shifted in her. She no longer wanted to dwell on the past. She had spent too many days drowning in sorrow, betrayal, and fear. She was tired of standing still in the ruins. It was time to rebuild. She made a decision. Sarah sold her share of the apartment and bought a modest new place in a different part of the city, somewhere quiet, unfamiliar, free of old shadows. She left her job at the firm where she had worked for over a decade. It had been stable, respectable, but it no longer sparked anything in her. She found a new position, one with more creativity, more growth, more life. For the first time in years, she felt like the world was opening instead of closing. James, too, was healing, slowly but steadily. He found a new job and took up photography, something he had loved as a teenager but abandoned somewhere along the road to adulthood. He started traveling, even if only to nearby towns. He would call Sarah from the road, describing the sunsets he captured, the faces of strangers, the feeling of movement again after so much stillness. Their bond deepened through these calls. They had always been close, but now there was something unbreakable between them. One afternoon, while Sarah was walking home from the grocery store, she turned a corner and nearly bumped into David. He looked older, worn, thinner than she remembered. There were lines around his mouth that hadn't been there before, and his eyes were shadowed with something that might have been regret. When he saw her, he froze. He lowered his eyes as if hoping she wouldn't notice him, but Sarah did, and something inside her told her not to look away. "David," she said calmly. "Wait." He stopped, turned slowly. There was shame in his face, maybe even sorrow. "Sarah, I've been wanting to say something." She looked at him steadily, without anger, without fear. "I'm sorry," he said, barely more than a whisper. "For everything." She didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch between them, not out of cruelty, but out of care. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "I forgive you." David blinked, startled. "You do?" "I'm not doing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it for me. I don't want to carry it anymore. I don't want to hate you. I want to move on." He nodded slowly, his lips pressed together. I hope you find happiness, Sarah. Real happiness." "I will," she said, "and I hope you do, too." She turned and walked away, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with peace. In the days that followed, she returned to a calm routine, but it was a different kind of calm, one born not from comfort, but from resilience. She had been through fire, and she had emerged stronger, clearer, more certain of who she was. She understood now that betrayal wasn't the end. It was a rupture, a painful, necessary breaking point that forced her to examine everything she believed, everything she wanted, everything she deserved. It was the beginning of something new. She no longer doubted her instincts. She no longer clung to things that no longer served her. She valued truth even when it hurt. She valued herself, and she was no longer afraid of change. There were still hard days, moments when the past tugged at her sleeve like a ghost, refusing to be forgotten. But Sarah knew how to face it now. She had tools. She had strength. She had people. James, Michael, new friends, a life waiting to unfold. She stood at her window one morning, coffee in hand, watching the soft light fill her new apartment. There were no voices from the past, no regrets tapping at the glass, just silence. And in that silence, Sarah smiled. Spring came gently that year. The city seemed to breathe again with trees dressing in soft green, and the air filled with the scent of beginnings. Sarah found herself walking more, lingering in bookstores, listening to music she hadn't touched in years. She bought a new notebook and started writing again. Thoughts, impressions, fragments of herself rediscovered. One Saturday morning, she received a text from James. "Want to go hiking? I found this trail outside the city. Looks beautiful." She smiled. "Count me in." They spent the day wandering through hills and wildflowers, talking about everything and nothing. James had brought his camera, and at one point he turned to her and said, "You look lighter, like you finally let go." "I have," she answered. "For the first time in a long while. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They sat on a rock, the sky stretching above them, the wind soft and warm. "Do you ever think about her?" he asked quietly. "Rachel." He nodded. "Sometimes," she admitted, but not with anger anymore, just as a lesson. A reminder that people aren't always what they seem, that you have to trust your gut, that even the deepest betrayal doesn't define who you are. It just reveals who they are. James nodded, thoughtful. "I think I needed to hear that." Later that evening, after James dropped her off, Sarah stood for a long time in her new living room, watching the fading light spill across the walls. The scars were still there somewhere beneath the surface, but they didn't sting like they used to. They were quiet now, faded reminders, not open wounds. And then a soft knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it and found a small envelope lying on the mat. No name, no address. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was from years ago, her and James laughing in the backyard at a family barbecue, arms around each other, faces sunlit and carefree. On the back, in neat handwriting, it read, "Some truths are worth fighting for." Sarah stared at it, a lump rising in her throat. She hadn't heard from Michael since that last call. She didn't know where he was or what had happened to him, but this small, quiet gesture, was enough. She tucked the photo into a frame and set it on her bookshelf. In the weeks that followed, Sarah started saying yes to new things. She joined a local book club, took a weekend painting class, met people she would never have crossed paths with before. She even went on a date, just one, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was open again, open to the world, open to herself. Her past hadn't disappeared. It had simply lost its grip. And as she lay in bed one night, the city humming softly beyond her window, she whispered to the dark, "I made it." It wasn't a triumphant declaration. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, true. She had walked through the wreckage. She had faced the truth. She had chosen to rise. And now she was free.